When I ask people what the strongest card in Marvel Snap is, I get a wide variety of answers, and none of them are the answer that I think is actually correct. Ranging from the credit card to Shang Chi, I think people have a fundamental misunderstanding of what exactly the metagame right now revolves around, and I didn't really twig onto this until I was having a conversation about what the best decks in the game are right now, and I realized that all three of the decks that I would consider legit contenders for best deck in the game all have one card in it that overlaps. That card is Captain America Sam Wilson. And I remember that when this card came out, I basically said that it is an 8 out of 10, where previous season pass cards were 10 out of 10s. And so part of the reason I'm making this video is to correct a misconception that may have come from me that this card is weaker than it is. This card is much stronger than anyone is giving it credit for. I think a lot of people recognize that it's pretty good at this point, but I don't think people understand just how good it actually is and just what an incredible upgrade it is in all of the decks that it's run in relative to what was in those decks beforehand. As an example, I want to take a look at the Scream deck, which for a very long time has famously been a deck that has one good 2-drop and then a bunch of fairly mediocre ones. This has been my most successful deck in the most recent season, and a lot of that is, in my opinion, because of Sam Wilson. Sam Wilson in this deck provides a genuine alternative to Scream. This is a deck that was very much Scream on 2. Scream was the Mr. Negative of this archetype. Scream would show up and then you'd win, or Scream wouldn't show up and then you'd lose. Sam Wilson is going to be better than Scream a lot of the time you're playing this deck. Being able to play Sam Wilson into Kraven the Hunter will scale you higher than Scream without follow-up a lot of the time. That should have been the canary in the coal mine for letting me know how problematic this card was, but I still somehow didn't twig it until today. For the record, I think this is one of the best decks in the game, if not the best. It would be my pick for best deck in the game if you asked me right now. And a large part of that is because it just has so few actively bad draws. And this is a deck that is using Sam Wilson effectively pretty fairly. You're throwing the shield from Sam Wilson to another card, in this case Kraven instead of Captain America, but it's doing what it was intended to do. You're not going any way out of the way. It is just a good baseline card. And with that in mind, I think it's time to look at this card, not just in terms of what it is at baseline, but in terms of what it is on top of that really sets it apart from every other card in the game. So to me, what I've been trying to establish so far is that there are situations where I would rather play Sam Wilson on turn 2 than Scream in my Scream deck. They're not the most common situations, but the fact that they exist at all is a little bit of a red flag. So what is it exactly that this card is giving me that other cards simply are not? At baseline, Sam Wilson starts as a 2-4. He is a 2-3 on his own, plus a 1-1 that you get on the board at the beginning of the game. That 1-1 can be moved to Sam Wilson to make him a 2-5, and then away, and then back to him, so he's usually about a 2-8 in terms of value if you play him on turn 2. If you play him into something like Kraven or Captain America, he ends up being much more than a 2-8 because you are getting an additional 2 points every time you move it off of him, so he ends up being something closer to a 2-12. I think at baseline, it's pretty clear to see why that is a good thing to have. This is a card that ranges from 2-4 across 2 bodies, one of which is movable and cannot be destroyed, to a 2-12. And that is before we even get into the fact that, like, hey, there are going to be games where there's a Death's Domain and your Sam Wilson is going to be able to win it by moving the shield onto that. There are going to be games where there is a location you can't get on, like Altar of Death. Exactly the same thing. This is a card that is spread across 2 bodies in a beneficial way because the second body can move, so it's not locking you anywhere, and has baseline 2-4 to 2-12 stats. But that's not even all. This card does even more than that. Surtur is a deck that I originally did expect Sam Wilson to go into, but I didn't expect the boost that Sam Wilson gave the deck to be as prominent as it was. Sam Wilson doesn't just help you by giving you a free Cull Obsidian and thereby clearing up spots in the deck that were previously being used on fairly mediocre 1-drops in order to enable the Cull Obsidian. He is also an excellent tool when it comes to getting and maintaining priority in order to play something like Crossbones. In other words, the card is phenomenally powerful at reducing the effective downside of 2 cards in this deck that are required in order for the deck to actually function. You need to be playing Crossbones or Cull Obsidian, and you need to actually have them be active. And because of that, Sam Wilson ends up being excellent in this deck, not just because you get to be able to play a Cull Obsidian, but also because he scales so high, you're almost never going to not be able to play the Crossbones too. So this is a card that has other additional hooks, right? Like, they effectively made a 2/3 that comes with Patches the Pirate. And everyone should know that in Marvel Snap, a card like Patches the Pirate might not be as valuable as it was in Hearthstone because you can't tempo trade, right? But the way that this card enables tempo trading is with stuff like Crossbones. You get to effectively capitalize on being ahead early in a way that other cards are not going to allow you to do. Because this card goes in multiple lanes and also scales upward in its own lane, you are almost never going to be in a situation where you have Sam Wilson and can't play a Crossbones. You are very literally never going to be in a situation where you have Sam Wilson and can't play your Cull Obsidian. That is massive because these cards are costed with the idea that there is a functional downside, and Sam Wilson is saying at least 95% of the time, there is no downside to just playing your 4/10s. I didn't even mention Atuma. It's not like a guarantee because the Atuma, thank God, doesn't just target the weakest thing, it targets anything with power that is less. But yeah, like if you need an extra power in your Atuma lane, you can put this in there and it cannot die. You can even get in a situation where it's like, all right, well, my play is supposed to be roll a 50-50 on this Atuma and then hope it ends up hitting the Captain America shield because, again, it cannot die. There are 3 4/10s in this game that Sam Wilson synergizes with. And that's not all. We also have the actual text on Sam Wilson to build some synergy into. This is where things get like really crazy, right? Because this is a deck that just has not been good for basically ever. But I think we are sort of at the point where it's like Sam Wilson plus whatever synergy and another really good card, and you're just going to be good to go. Like, you can just do whatever you want. Put Sam Wilson in any deck that benefits from like having priority or having a big guy or the ability to move or runs the other Captain America or has synergy with ongoing. Like, this is what sort of twigs me to this is someone in my Discord asked, what do you think the best decks in the game are? And I named Scream and Surtur and the ongoing deck. And they all run Sam Wilson. And I hadn't really thought about him in this context before because, like, this is not a card that I think a lot of people are complaining about. I was originally going to do a hot takes video today. Not one of the 100+ hot takes I got were complaining about Sam Wilson. I got people complaining about Mill. I got people complaining about Mr. Negative. I got people complaining about a bunch of stuff. Nobody was complaining about Sam Wilson. And I'm pretty sure he's the best card in the game. And I kind of want to dive into, like, what does that mean? What does it mean when the community perception of how strong a card is so far off what is actually strong? Every single other one of these cards got named to me in those hot takes as something that is a busted card. These are their stats at top 10% infinite, 6,000 plus collection level. In other words, the most competitive field we possibly have. And in that field, Sam Wilson makes every other elite card look like crap. Iron Patriot is a card that I have had a ton of discussions about nerfing. Red Guardian is a card that has haters so dedicated they are making Twitter accounts to say delete Red Guardian with like the username at Red Guardian hater in my hot takes. Okay? Shang Chi, someone says, is a crutch or a noob trap or whatever. The probably most discussed card in the entire game that people talk about as a mistake or as broken or as imbalanced. And every single one of them looks like total ass compared to Sam. And like, you know, there's some confounding factors here, right? Like those cards are probably going in a lot more decks, or at least people are more willing to play them in decks where they don't make perfect sense. Like it's not normal that a card like Sam comes out and all three of the best decks are playing Sam. And it's sort of hard to extricate that from like, are all three of those best decks playing Sam, or do they just happen to be the three good fits for Sam, and that is what's making them good? Is he driving the bus? Is he along for the ride? Like, I think it's very easy for you to look at this and say, okay, well, Scream is broken, Doom 2099 is broken, Surtur's broken, and I think those would all be fair things to take away there. But it is notable that no one was really complaining about Doom 2099 ongoing before Sam came out. And Scream was a much worse deck where the card itself got nerfed because it was such a powerhouse on its own that they wanted to make a more even spread of power. Like, I think that Sam Wilson is doing a lot for these decks, and it's just sort of going understated because people aren't really grasping how strong it actually is. There is one other really important thing that Sam Wilson is doing, and it's making this card way worse. Red Guardian was the dominant tech card before Sam Wilson came out. I remember multiple 8 Cubes episodes of myself and Lambie just effusively praising this card, heaping praise on it as like a one-size-fits-all answer to basically everything you needed. It is no longer that, in large part because Sam Wilson allows people to protect the stuff that they need to protect from this card. You are now much less likely to actually hit a Doom 2099 with your Red Guardian because they can just leave the Sam shield there and have it actually be a shield. And that's pretty nuts too. So what we have in effect is a card that is anywhere from a 2-4 to a 2-12. Based on, you know, generally what it's going to end up at. I'm putting 212 as the top end, even though it's not. Because, like, yes, there are going to be games where you have Sam and Cap and you Spectrum them, and it gets way bigger than that, but I'm not even going to say that. I'm just going to say 212 is the cap with Sam and either Craven or Cap, just in terms of the power you get from Sam Wilson, okay? So 2-4 to 212, that's what the card is. Also, it blanks opposing Red Guardians. Also, it has synergy with Crossbones, Atuma, and Cull Obsidian. Also, it has synergy with Craven. Also, it has synergy with ongoing cards. And so, like, once you add all of that together, I start to think that it's not actually a coincidence that, like, when you ask me the 3 best decks in the game, I name 3 Sam decks. And that's really what I wanted to get at when I was making this video. I realize that there are going to be a bunch of comments that are like, yeah, of course the new Season Pass card is broken. But I will say that I've gotten basically 0 comments complaining about how broken Sam is. I don't think people processed how good he is, or understand how good he is, or even really think he's all that good. And so the reason I'm making this video is so that nobody in the future is going to go back to my other Sam video and says, oh, you know, I don't think KM Best thought he was that good. I'm not going to buy Sam. I'm going to look at you right now. Right, eyes up. Sam Wilson is the best Season Pass card since Anti-Venom. Or Agent Venom. I'm never going to get that right. Straight up. He's the best Season Pass card since then. He's better than Iron Patriot. He's better than Galacta. I want you to understand what I'm saying when I say this. This is an extremely powerful card, and I do not want you to sit here and miss out on them. I thought that he was going to be weaker than Iron Patriot. I think it is ultimately clear to me he is dramatically stronger. This is one of the best cards in the game. He goes in the 3 best decks in the game. I don't know what could possibly change that. He is absolutely phenomenal, and I want people to understand that this is actually a seriously good card. The other thing I wanted to highlight here is, though, that just because the card is really good doesn't mean you necessarily have to complain about it, right? And I think that's the other thing that Sam sort of sparks in me is, like, what's interesting to me so much is that the cards people complain about, the decks people complain about, the archetypes people complain about, they complain about end-game board states and sort of the feeling of hopelessness. So it's like a complaint about Mills, you can't draw cards, or Mr. Negative that you couldn't compete, or whatever. Those are the things that really make people sad. And no one seems to really get sad at just like a really good value card. And that's really interesting to me. Because I think Sam Wilson is just like such a fair card in the sense of like, it's not doing anything too broken. It's just like a little bit too good. And so people don't really have their sensors tuned for like, I hate things that are a little bit too good. They have their sensors tuned for things that feel unfair. And I think it's really remarkable that Sam Wilson is as strong as it is and doesn't feel unfair in any meaningful way. It's just in the 3 best decks in the game, but it doesn't feel unfair. I think you're going to get a lot of people saying like, yeah, KM, Iron Patriot is better than Sam Wilson. I can't find any evidence for that. I actually just can't. It might be like more broadly applicable, but the numbers don't lie when it comes to those cards, I think. Like if that amount of sample size, I can't really make that argument anymore. And I think that that's remarkable because people complain about Iron Patriot all the time. Nobody has ever complained about Sam Wilson. I swear to God. And like that, part of me worries making this video, what I'm going to do is get people complaining about Sam Wilson. I really don't want that. I'm making this video to make the point of like, if you're someone who doesn't buy season passes and you watched my previous video where I was like, this is an 8 out of 10, where other season pass cards were 10 out of 10, I'm saying I was wrong. This dude's a 10 out of 10. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. As always, I have been KM Best. You have been phenomenal. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm really interested to see sort of what the community perception is on this, because this is in some ways a video about community perception. Like, there are 3 really strong decks with Sam Wilson right now. I think the 3 best decks in the game all play the same card. And no one's complaining about that card. And I'm just kind of interested in what your thoughts are on that. As always, you've been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one.